Good morning to everyone on the platform. Committee Secretary, can we check whether we have a quorum for this meeting?
Good morning, Chairperson and everyone on the forum. Chair, we do not correct. Shall we give members another 5 minutes, Chair?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chairperson, we correct. Shall I do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. You may proceed.
Ms. Muatse,
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
Dr. Ntwane,
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
I'm present.
Mr. Bergman,
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues.
Good
Ms.
morning.
Ms. Floniana,
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Mr. Thring.
Morning, Chair. Morning, colleagues.
Chair, those are the members currently on the platform. The others may still join us, and we have some apologies.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we note that. If we can just have the agenda, please, Committee Secretary. Thank you very much. So can we check whether there are any apologies?
Chair, we have an apology from Mr. McPherson, Chair. Mr. Mumbani and Mr. Malametia has joined the platform, Chair, as well. Those are the only apology that I have, Chair.
And then we also note an apology from the Minister to leave the meeting at 10.
Yes, Chair.
At or around 10 for another engagement with the President. So let's see how we manage time so that we can allow the Minister to attend to his other responsibilities.
Chair?
So, yes.
We also have an apology from the two deputy ministers, chairs. They will not be attending. They have other commitments at this time, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. We note that also. Can we have a move in a second for the adoption of the agenda as tabled? Honorable Moatse.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move for adoption of the agenda as tabled.
Thank you. Honorable Mbuyane.
While it's struggling, Chairperson, I can stand to second the move of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the meeting, Honorable Malamacha. Right, so our agenda is duly adopted. So in our briefing today by the DTIC on Black Industrialists with a special focus on agro-processing and the energy sector, for the 2023-24 financial year, the DTIC has set output targets of, first of all, achieving an output of 40 million rand in Black Industrialists, and also supporting 23,000 jobs in Black Industrialist firms supported by the DTIC group. In this regard, the purpose of our meeting today is to receive a briefing by the DTIC on the financial and non-financial support programs available to Black industrialists from itself and its development finance institutions that would contribute towards achieving these output targets. The focus is particularly on manufacturing within the renewable energy and agro-processing sectors. And then after that, we will consider minutes. So I see the team is led by the Minister, and I now hand over to him to take us forward and to maybe just indicate who's on the platform joining the team. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, honourable members. My greetings also to the staff of Parliament, as well as the staff from the department and the entities. Chairperson, we are joined by a large and I hope very well-informed delegation of officials. From the department itself, it's led by the Acting Director General, Malebo Mabichi Thompson, and she is accompanied by a number of Deputy Directors General and some Chief Directors with responsibility for various aspects of the Black Industrialist Programs. From the NEF, the National Empowerment Fund, we are joined by the CEO, Ms. Pilisiwe Mtetwa, as well as her senior management team responsible for various parts of the operations of the NEF. From the IDC, we are joined by the Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Joanne Bate, as well as a number of senior managers responsible for different aspects of the work of the IDC, including agro-processing and energy. On behalf of the entire team, I'd like to thank the chairperson and the committee for giving us a further opportunity to set out progress on the Black Industrialist Programme. Honourable members will recall that we gave a comprehensive report in September 2020 on the different aspects of the program and the resources available. We followed this up in November last year with a presentation to the Portfolio Committee on the outcomes of the inaugural Black Industrialists and Exporters Conference. So today what we seek to do is particularly to take up the invitation of the committee to focus on two sectors, namely agro-processing and energy. I'm going to ask Tsulu to flight the presentation, and we'll use the presentation to illustrate the work that we do, but also to provide a little bit of information on the case studies, the impact that the program has with different entrepreneurs. So the briefing today incorporates the work of the DTIC, the Industrial Development Corporation, as well as the NEF. But we've also taken an opportunity to look at some of the work that is being done through the competition frame. And there are a number of other areas that focus presentation we've not been able to do, and I'll point to those in a short while. But first, we introduce honourable members to Sicelo Mzobi, who's a supervisor assistant at one of the Black Industrialist activities or firms. By way of an introduction, I will briefly run through this because the committee would be familiar with many of these issues. The policy, by way of just contextualizing it, the initial transformation policies immediately after 1994 focused largely on enabling Black South Africans to obtain a non-controlling stake, let's call it a minority stake, in existing enterprises. And it did not address the need to focus on new enterprise development or to promote businesses that are ultimately owned by Black South Africans. In 2015, Cabinet approved the Black Industrialist Policy, which seeks to increase participation of Black South Africans in ownership and control of the of firms in key sectors and value chains of the economy. And the DTIC, the department itself, promotes these objectives, among others, through grant funding, and the IDC and the NEF provide funding, largely loans, to eligible Black entrepreneurs, including those who have had difficulty in obtaining funding from commercial banks. The economic transformation is often used as a synonym for broad-based Black economic empowerment. But economic transformation is wider than our range of broad-based BEE policies. And they embrace a number of elements, including three that I want to draw attention to. The first is our efforts to transform the structure of the economy to grow faster and more inclusively. For example, addressing the high levels of market concentration, including through competition policies. Next week, the committee will be receiving a report from the Competition Commission on its work on online platforms, things like food delivery services, online food delivery services, property platforms, and so on. And that's one part of economic transformation. The second one is shifting the dependence of the economy on the export of raw materials, so that we build a more balanced and dynamic economy. These are industrial policies. It's what we report back in our quarterly reports, what we're doing in the auto industry, in the clothing and textile industry, and so on. And those ones are about adding more value so that we're not a mineral dependent economy that relies only on the commodity cycle, where the prices are rising for minerals globally or not. The third one is the participation of Black South Africans, of women, and of young people in the economy. And when I talk about young people and women, it's not only Black young people and Black women, it's all women, it's all young people, but particularly also to bring in Black South Africans so that we broaden the base of entrepreneurship and we promote fairness in the economy. Moving on, the objectives of empowerment. There are multiple objectives. The first one is, of course, redress, to deal with the history of exclusion and the legacy it's left. The second one is to lay the foundation for deeper growth by economic inclusion that widens the talent pool that enterprises can draw from, bringing in enterprising and skilled Black South Africans, women and young people. But it's also about addressing high inequalities in our society, a challenge that many countries face. It's not unique to South Africa, and it's associated with globalization's impact in different parts of the world. And so countries often have measures to address inequality. We've tried to use empowerment to address all three of these objectives. The evolution of empowerment policies, we want to identify 4 key turning points. The first one was the promotion of individual share ownership through a non-controlling share within an existing business, which I've spoken about. It's often been criticized, but it did help in that initial process of capital accumulation in the hands of Black South Africans, where the law kept Black South Africans from the ability to accumulate capital that can be used as a source of investment and participation in the economy. Those initial efforts helped to shift some capital into the hands of Black South Africans. The second one is broad-based empowerment made up of programs that bring into share ownership and programs of similar types, community structures, consortia of women or youth, collective investment, empowerment vehicles, and so on. And some of these have funded social programs like community bursary schemes, HIV programs, and many others. The third one was a focus on Black industrialists to enable Black entrepreneurs to develop a controlling stake in a company, often through new firms that are set up and with executive management involvement in these firms. And then more recently has been a much greater focus on the expansion of ownership by the employees of a company and developing an inclusive South African model, shifting from our history of the adversarial approach on the shop floor. This slide just deals with a number of different instruments that we use to promote transformation. They're from finance to sector master plans to competition settlements, PEE code, equity equivalent investment programs, SEZs, state preferential procurement, and so on. The 10 core DTIC outputs for this year are set out in this slide, and of the 10 core ones, 2 are specifically focused on Black industrialists. The 6th one is our goal is to have at least 40 billion rand in Black industrialist output for the year, and to have at least 23,000 jobs in Black industrialist firms. But obviously all the other areas also include participation by Black industrialists. For example, we have a growing number of Black industrialists that are now part of the investment pledges that are made annually, where Black South Africans put money on the table in order to grow and expand their businesses. For example, with manufacturing exports, we have a growth now in the number of Black South Africans participating in the export effort, as we will point to in 1 or 2 cases. In the jobs created, similarly, these are all examples of it. Moving on to the kind of sectors that Black industrialists are involved in, it's really a growing number of sectors. And I mean, we've just taken here 10 examples, from agro-processing and agriculture to the automotive and transport equipment sector, to chemical, medical and industrial products, energy, productive services, participation by Black South Africans in machinery, equipment and electronics, in infrastructure, in minings and metals, in textiles and wood products, and in aerospace. The products that are supported includes things like in agro-processing, you'd have Black South Africans in the production of castor oil and fruit juices and condiments and various others. In automotives, they would participate in coil pressing, plastic injection molded components, steel subcomponents, nuts, bolts, and so on. In textiles, you'll have man-made fibers, clothing, cotton yarn, footwear, steel fabrication. There'll be in a number of different programs. Construction and automotive are some of those that are being supported through their steel and metal fabrication products. And I can go through each of these, but they make the point that there's a wide focus out there in the economy, and a growing number of Black South Africans are involved. Now, when we look at the Black Industrialist Programme, it's one of a number of recent interventions that the department has in place to expand equity and jobs in the economy. And each of these programs bring something unique, and they complement each other, they balance each other, so that we reach, through the measures that are available, public measures, we reach a wider layer of South Africans. So in addition to the Black Industrialist Programme, we have a worker or employee share ownership program that we work with the private sector to get more shareholding by employees in a company. And this is advanced through agreements reached often with competition merging parties and the DTIC to increase or introduce worker ownership. The IDC is also now beginning to put more emphasis and effort into worker ownership in firms that it's supporting, and I hope we would be able to see a lot more of this in future. What this does, it broadens the base of ownership. You need an individual to have a significant and often controlling block of shares in a company. That's the entrepreneur. They drive a business. They make the big decisions. But in addition to that, we also need to permeate in society share ownership to a wider layer of people. And here, by building this broad base of ownerships where hundreds of thousands of workers are able to be owners of shares, you spread wealth and opportunity in the economy. But also what the worker ownership does, the employee share ownership program, it builds non-racial participation, because these programs, while they benefit principally Black South Africans, they are available, they're open to all employees in a company, and it's typically on a one worker, one share basis, irrespective of seniority. And so workers across different historical categories, color groups, and so on, are able to share in a common benefit, which is share ownership and dividend flows. And it builds that non-racial character, which is part of what we seek to build. While we deal with the past, we're also building a new South African identity that these share ownership programs are targeting. There's a social employment fund. We've given comprehensive reports in the past on this. They provide community members with exposure to the work environment and the production of socially useful services and products like health awareness, food production, literacy programs, and so on. There's energy support measures that we now target for small and medium enterprises. So this is not directed only at Black industrialists. It goes for companies, smaller companies in the economy. There's a skills development program that's not aimed at employment, or rather it's not aimed at equity or shares. It's aimed at improving the caliber and quality of skills available to employees within a company, and often to young people who get their first opportunity to work in a company. And these are all things that we are able to do together. The other policy instruments complementing the Black industrialists, they include both financial and non-financial ones. Of course, the focus today will be on principally the examples where there have been financial support. These are sometimes business grants. They're a small portion of the total, and we're increasingly shifting away from it. And historically, the DTIC gave these grants, and these grants are often used by Black industrialists as a critical part of their startup capital. The second one is business loans, which is the predominant form of financial support. And I believe it's a more appropriate instrument in many cases. It allows us to stretch the money more widely, because these business loans are repayable, and so they increase the flow back to the entities, the IDC, the NEF, and through proper structuring, the DTIC can get the grants to become much more, or a bigger portion of the grants can also go as loans in future. And it means that the resource envelope expands, and instead of only a few Black industrialists benefiting, you can widen the pool of Black South Africans who come into the economy. But there are other measures, and one of it is networks. Very often, to succeed in business, you need to have these networks of support. We've built a Black exporter network, and we want to put more effort into it, that those Black exporters can share their experience and their contacts as they export to other parts of the world. They're private sector supplier development programs. They often finance through competition public interest conditions. We've shared some of that with the committee. Skills and business development support and export marketing support. This presentation today won't look at everything that I've raised. Because of the request by the committee, we will focus on the Black Industrialist Programme and its impact in the food and energy sectors. And we're going to cover 46 case studies. And in addition to what we're covering today, in the quarterly reports of the DTIC group, we will highlight additional case studies of Black industrialists. We think by Q4, we would probably have covered about 200 case studies. The DTIC is also conducting a Black industrialist census, which is expected to be completed by no later than Q4. And we'll be hosting the next Black Industrialist Conference during this financial year, which will offer a platform where we can highlight successes, but we can also point to challenges that we experience and draw lessons for the next phase. So I want to recap. We had a Black Industrialist and Exporter Conference last year, and honorable members will recall the presentation on it. 1,300 participants, 800 plus Black firms, 139 exhibitors. We had speakers, panels. We gave 10 excellence awards. There were 5 development finance institutions were present, 22 banks and finance officials from the private sector, and we had big buyers from the biggest retailers in the country participating in this, trying to identify the opportunities to procure from Black industrialists. I want to recap that conference comprised 5 platforms, a forum, networks of support that the president launched, a marketplace for Black industrialist exhibitors, awards of excellence, and an information media and public awareness platform. We showcased many in the exhibition, many Black-owned businesses. 30 of them were in agriculture and agro-processing, 6 were in energy, oil and gas, 5 in automotives, 9 in plastics and chemicals, 8 in cosmetics, 32 in fashion, 4 in film, 6 in furniture, 12 in general manufacturing, 7 in innovation and technology, and 20 in metal and mining services. So I'm going to take all of that as a backdrop. And in the next part of the presentation, we're highlighting 46 case studies on Black industrialists in food and energy to identify, instead of saying, this is the program, this is how much money we make available annually, because that information is in the budget of the department and in the many presentations that the department provides to the committee. Here we want to see the impact. And on food and agro-processing, it's about investment in the development of projects and businesses that create new or expand local manufacturing capacity, and they often result in the creation of new jobs. The presentation in the food sector, we've selected a few case studies. There'll be a special focus on poultry to provide feedback on the impact of the poultry master plan. And the presentation will also try to provide some information to show that Black industrialists are contributing to food security, to export earnings, to job creation, and to ensuring nutritious meals for all South Africans. So let me then run through a few, and I'm not going to go in detail through every slide, But here's an example of Musa Daniel Ntimba. He's got a company, Matumaini Farming. It's a black-owned entity. And their core business is growing broiler chicken, slaughtering it, and distributing the products mainly in Mpumalanga. And the product range would be fresh whole birds and freshly cut chicken portions. And here the NEF approved loan funding. I see in the box it says IDC, and it's invested into this company, resulting in the creation of 106 permanent jobs that were supported. The next example is Babirua Fruit Exports. It's from the Mohashoa Family Trust. It's located in Worcester in the Western Cape, and they do plant and packaging of grapes for the export market. The funding assisted with the construction of pack houses for packing of the grapes and, of course, pears, and it covers 126 jobs. The project enabled the company to export the grapes to the European Union, the Middle East, the UK, and South Asia. And they're also, from this year, exporting to the United States. And they're producing 230,000 cartons of grapes every year. Now, what this example shows is that when we look at agriculture, we often think of it only as established businesses, but more and more Black South Africans are getting into not only subsistence agriculture, but a very export-oriented agriculture that is a significant generator of opportunities and export earnings for South Africa. Then this bright and happy picture is Eldorado Foods. It's a Black-owned food manufacturing plant based in Joburg, and they received support for equipment to produce these maize meal snacks. And they buy their raw material inputs from the local maize meal producers. And the majority of workers live in the Mansfield informal settlement, as well as Eldorado Park and Freedom Park townships. And they export to other SADC countries, Mozambique, Malawi, Botswana, and Lesotho. And there are 227 jobs in this company. Majesty Oil Mills receive funding for machinery and equipment, and they expanded their facility. They now employ 314 people, and they process soya seeds to produce soya oil and mince products, as well as soya cakes for animal feed. And they're also processing sunflower seeds to produce sunflower oil. The next example is of a company, KMF Holding. They in poultry, but also they've got 3 cattle studs, and they grow maize and sunflower. And they're in Lichtenburg and Magaliesburg. And with IDC support, they're building a red meat abattoir, a feedlot, and a rendering plant. So this is really to up their game. And there's a picture here of Dr. Obakeng Mfikwe. And there are 144 jobs that are supported. The next example is the Noodle Factory. It's a company in Philippi in Cape Town. And it's a very interesting story because we introduced this company a number of years back to Massmart as part of the Massmart competition obligations. And they assisted this company. And the company has grown over this period. I think they've also had IDC funding. And they started with 10 staff members. and they now employ 300 full-time workers, 95% of whom are women. And I was told that the production has expanded very, very dramatically, from 60,000 packets of noodles to 1 million packets of noodles that's produced. And they've also gone into new products, including pasta and instant pasta. And that's a Western Cape province program. Moving from Western Cape to Mpumalanga, the Mabogwane family has agribusiness, and it's again chicken, but they also have cattle, sheep, ducks, and goats. And the IDC supports this program to try to grow the impact of the business. And it's, of course, part of the poultry master plan. Moving to Dreamland Piggery, it's based in Gauteng, and there's a lot of details of the program on the slide. Moving next, and that's a woman-owned business. Moving next to a family-owned business, again in Western Cape. They do premium brand chicken and beef products, and they open a meat market close to Parow, and the funding has supported 143 jobs at the plant. The next one is in Zeerust in Northwest, and this is also part of the effort to support the poultry master plan, and it's Mr. and Mrs. Homongwe, and they have 2 broiler houses producing 80,000 chickens. They receive funding, and they now signed a contract for 320,000 birds per cycle. That's also a poultry master plan example. Moving on to Limpopo and Makado, Northwest is a startup agribusiness, and it's operated by a 28-year-old farmer, a young farmer, who supplies the formal and the independent market in Limpopo. And there's a lot of detail of the day-old chicks that are produced. I'm told that Northwest will produce close to 200,000 day-old chicks a week, which will, if successful, make it the second largest hatchery in Limpopo. And here's an example of young people taking on the opportunities in the market. The next one is a company called Oya Foods. They started during COVID. They do long shelf life, ready to eat and ready to cook foods. This is for the more health conscious lovers of food, dried vegetable powders, easy to drink when you're on the run to your next meeting and you need to have something. And to round it all off, they do chocolates. That's a very good thing and something we need more of. Miss Naledi in Tondini in Benoni is also in poultry. She's a young woman, and she's involved in the production of day-old chicks, slaughtering fresh chicken, and she runs a farm that has 4 chicken houses and a holding capacity of 30,000 broiler chickens. And that's an NEF program. Turning to a company, Makamisa Foods, they do this jalapeno chilies and pickled vegetables to spice up your food. So when you have all of this chicken and you want to be able to bring a little bit of flavor to it, you can go to another Black Industrialist, Terence Leluma, and you can use his jalapeno with your chicken. Watch out, Nando's. Then Wine Foods is a woman-owned business in Alexandria, and they had been a victim of some of the vandalism that we saw during the July unrest. And the NEF approved funding, and their clients include many of the places like pizza places and so on. So they've been supported to replace stock and assist with shop fittings and so on. This company, Osman's Taj Mahal, is also family-owned business, and they in the retailing of things like lentils and rice, but they're also big in the spice industry. And the IDC has helped the company to restore its production capacity after it was impacted by the floods in KZN, and it's allowed the company to get back to its original strength and replace critical machinery and equipment that was lost. So it illustrates that sometimes what the DFIs do is they come in when there are critical challenges. We saw the July 2021 unrest, we saw the floods, and companies that would be wiped out where there's a family history or an entrepreneurial history of success, and life just gives that firm a blow that can destroy it. Then often our development finance institutions step in and assist that company to get back on its feet. That company would typically repay the loan at the end of the loan period, and it would be able to continue. So each of these examples illustrate a different part of the role of the state in these examples. The next one is an egg producer. So you don't only have to have your chickens, you can also have some eggs for breakfast. And some of those eggs can come from Mr. Pilani's company. He would be competing with other egg producers. You'll see, for example, Lebogang Kanyezi. She's a poultry farmer in Chakastad, in Mpumalanga, and she's got a new hatchery infrastructure with hatching capacity. Look at all those eggs that she produces that goes off to supermarkets. I then go to eggs and chips in the morning for breakfast. So Pumla Holdings is an East London-based company in Eastern Cape, and they will be producing these potato chips, and they create 72 jobs in the Buffalo City metro area. The company will also replace a significant quantity of imports that are coming from, among others, the European Union countries. And that will, as part of our localization, that will bring 351 million rands worth of additional local output in our economy, where we're replacing imports with products that are grown here in South Africa. The next example is, I've been talking so much about chickens, and the chickens, when they are hungry, they need to eat. And so we're looking also at broiler starter things where animal feed and fertilizers are made available. And this company, Kepri Innovations in Kagiso in West Rand, is a company exactly in that sector. And it takes high volume organic waste from butcheries and abattoirs, and it converts it into commercial compost for plant growing and for animal feed industries. The next example you can see the Polonies there. This is a Black-owned business that cooks meats such as Viennas, Russians, and Polony, and they've been supported with machinery and equipment. And some of this is also to just improve the health standards so that we prevent listeria and other bacteria growth. And there's 151 jobs, and they supply ShopRite, Spar, Food Lovers Markets, and so on in the Eastern and Western Cape. The next example is of dried fruit. And this is the example of Mr. Ramabulana, who's got a company called Olive Black Invest. And he started producing dried fruit and processing fruit to make juice. He now supplies a company in which he has a minority stake, which is the second largest exporter of dried fruit. Moving on to the next example, it's of an entrepreneur with a Bachelor of Science degree in food science, and the firm produces a stabilizer from corn starch that is used to provide the texture and structure of dairy products. So if you want your yogurts and all of that, then this company, Innovation, is producing some of the things that go into the production of this. This is Dr. Monare in Hartbeespoort in Northwest, who is, it's a women-owned business in poultry. And there she's also been supported. Let me go back one. She's also been supported here in the installation of a solar panel system, which is expected to generate electricity cost savings, but also, we hope, provide her with a little bit of insulation during this period when the power grid of the country is being fixed. Then moving on to the example of Equezi Agro Holdings. They do vegetables like butternut and spinach and green beans and tomatoes and peppers on communal land, and the IDC helped them to expand with irrigation infrastructure and a pack house. This is the Moloko family. They're an egg producer, and they operate from a small rural village in Northwest. And they've been assisted with additional hen houses and a pack house. The next example is of Kubalele Farming. It's a joint venture, and they into macadamia nuts. And it's not just the growing of it, but they've also got a de-husking facility that allows more of the processing of the nut to take place. 53 jobs. We then move next to a company that does chips, like potato chips and corn chips and maize chips, and they're in Verulam, and they sell to ShopRite and Pick n Pay and Macro. And they also export to Mauritius, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Swaziland, and Lesotho. And they are supported by the IDC and DTIC, 494 jobs in this company. Moving on to a company, R42 Capital. They produce cherries and almonds, and they quite a lot of their almonds, 90% of those almonds are into export markets, and 60% of the cherries are for South Africans. You can see the opportunities there to earn income. The next example that I've got here is Dr. Mlingana. She is also in the poultry business in Zanin in Limpopo. And really, it's all part of also building South Africa's ability to supply nutritious poultry to the local market. The next example are two entrepreneurs who do sauces for foods, but now they've decided that they're beginning to know this market, so they've gone into jams and fruit juice nectars, and the IDC support has helped them to obtain the necessary accreditation to expand their product line, and they're now going into carbonated drinks, cordials, and squashes in their product mix. This example of the Eastern Cape is a large producer of tomato paste. This is the All Joy brand that we see in our supermarkets, and they received support to expand their business, and they're a big and growing player, 400 jobs that are supported here. The next one is a biscuit manufacturer. So you can see that he's been supported with production capacity and working capital to buy the raw materials and to make the company a little bit more financially stable. We've taken a few examples where it's not direct government funding, where it's funding we get via partners through the competition process. Coca-Cola provided support to businesses, and here are support to sugarcane haulers, which help them to buy equipment to expand farming operation. This is after a drought had devastated the firm. The next example is also Coca-Cola, and this is where they produce apples and pears for export, and they got support for a pump house, a poison store, a spray pump, and a tractor, and they export to Middle Eastern and EU countries as well as other African countries. This Mr. Fakadi with his hat is a farmer that was also supported by Coca-Cola, and that support assisted him with heavy-duty equipment, and their product would be maize and sorghum, millet, soybean, and is in the Ugi area in the Eastern Cape. Then moving to the citrus area, citrus fruit has been a big focus. This is an example of a Black-owned business, Mr. Makanya, and it's people like Mr. Makanya that the European Union measures are hurting at the moment. Here is a Black South African working hard to provide the world with good and tasty citrus fruit, and unfortunately trade measures elsewhere in the world is undermining these businesses. Moving next to a further Coca-Cola example, this is fruit juice, cold pressed juice that are sold to consumers, where Coca-Cola assisted them with getting their businesses going. AB InBev also had competition obligations, and here's an example. We took a different example here, where this company, Isanti Glass, makes the glass, the packaging that food products go into, to show that not only are more Black South Africans entering the primary food market, but they're also getting into the supplier industries. And here there are 690 jobs in this company. So to sum up, from the sample of firms, and this is a small sample of a much larger number of firms that we could have drawn from, Black Industrialists produce meals that all of us can enjoy throughout the week. They produce chicken, which can be grilled or fried or made into soups, or It can be cooked with soya oil or sunflower oils that are also produced by Black industrialists. And it can be, those chickens can be fed with feed that is produced by Black South Africans. There are beef products and spices, because what is beef without some good spices? Mixed maybe with spinach, butternut, and green beans, all grown and produced by Black South Africans. And if you're snackish, you can have your pizza toppings and your pickled vegetables, maybe with a bit of pesto sauce, or different appetite, go for your 2-minute noodles and eggs, maybe with chicken sausage, or maize that can be part of a pap and chicken meal, or potato chips that can be eaten with a tomato sauce or jalapeno that's produced by Black South Africans. And for dessert, because we must have dessert too, you can have grapes and pears and cherries, or maybe some sliced citrus fruit with a little bit of almonds or dried fruits or macadamia or nuts or chocolates produced by Black South Africans. And if you feel a little bit less healthy, there's maize snacks and potato and corn chips or biscuits washed down with carbonated drinks or cordials that are produced by Black South Africans. And some of it, as I hope we can show now, may even be cooked or prepared with the renewable energy produced by Black industrialists. And that brings us very nicely to the next part of the presentation. But before going there, I wanted to just take one moment to talk about programs that are not Black industrialists, but bring large numbers of workers into food production. And this would be the Social Employment Fund, the SEF, that the IDC administers. And here is an example of the Seriti project, where there are 4,250 jobs that are created. And we see seedlings that are planted, crops that are harvested, young people that are employed, and 22 hectares that are under production, with 139 community gardens that are available. And there are other examples like that in the presentation. This breaks down the numbers by province that this particular projects got involved. Here's another example of a community food garden with spinach and mushroom and peas, sold to SPAR and to Checkers. And that brings me then to energy, because we need energy to cook with. And there are different kinds of projects here. This is Dr. Masango, and she runs a company. She owns a company called Ario Meta Power, and they produce inverters, soft starters, and rectifiers that convert AC to DC current and provide a power backup. And she's been supported as part of our efforts to build capabilities. And in her case, she's aiming at utility scale inverters that's going to be produced locally, and quite an important and interesting project. On the other side of the story is DLO Energy Solutions. They're a service provider that specialize in protection and automated solutions. And they include engineering, design, manufacturing of protection panels, and testing and commissioning of power plants. Then there's an example that is supported called H1 Kenhardt. It's the construction of 3 50-megawatt solar PV plants with battery energy storage systems in Kenhardt in the Northern Cape. And there's a Black-owned company, H1, that has got experience in constructing and operating small-scale IPPs with private sector offtakes. So this is where basically a firm wants to buy renewable energy. They buy it from this player, and they've got, H1 has got a partnership with Scatec, which is a Norwegian renewable energy project that is in the South African market and globally. Moving then to another example of Black Industrialists in the energy space. This is a company, the Rio Tile Group. They won the bid for the construction of the Msenge Emoni, which is a 69 megawatt wind farm. So I showed an example of a solar farm previously. Now I'm showing an example of a wind farm. And this is between Cookhouse and Bedford in the Eastern Cape. And this is an example, when it's completed, of energy that will be available to South Africans. The next example that I wanted to give is Art Solar. They produce these photovoltaic panels that in KZN, in New Germany, that's in the Pinetown area, and that's part of localizing the supply chain. Sometimes there's pushback on localizing supply chains, but they create jobs, they create opportunity, and they build the country's industrial resilience. And some of these businesses can grow into being export businesses. Pellegrin is a Black-owned business that is involved in a concentrated solar PV project with 36 megawatts of energy. And this just recalls the DTIC's Energy Action Plan, 1.3 billion rand in the energy resilience scheme that supports businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, to manage in this period of rebuilding the energy available to the grid. And here we just gave one example of a company called Global Wheel. They're not in food, they're not in energy, but they've been hit by the energy challenges, and the NEF supported this company, and they've now been approved under the Energy Resilience Scheme for the procurement of solar panels, inverters, and batteries to enable the company to operate during load shedding. That brings us to the conclusion. 46 Black industrialist firms. We've only selected 2 sectors of the economy. We've given an example of firms that employ workers, that generate income, that adds to the country's GDP, that produces tasty food and the energy to cook that food with. And now in the next phase of work, we want to expand the number of firms and to scale up the size and impact of existing firms, including through promoting market access in South Africa, and through opportunities like the African Continental Free Trade Area, but also exports to the European Union, the United Kingdom, China, the United States, the Middle East, and other parts of the world. So as I conclude, Chairperson, it's to say that what we seek to have with the Black Industrialist Programme is to bring more South Africans into productive enterprises, to give them very often just the little bit of capital support, or a little bit of market access, or some assistance when life's challenges hits firms in the economy, so that we grow this ecosystem. And if we had more time, we could have given even more examples just in the food industry alone of how we are making an impact in these examples. You'd have seen very small businesses. You'd have seen quite large businesses that are growing out of this. And we've got to scale up, because the size of the unemployment challenge in South Africa is so huge that even though these are successful examples, much more would need to be done. And so we are trying to see what are the lessons the IDC, NEF, and DTIC can learn from these programs, to be able to let the available fund stretch even more. And as I indicated, we have favored a greater shift from grant funding to loan funding. And there are still grant funding in the DTIC, but I would want the department to convert more and more of that to loan funding, so that the flow back as companies grow, prosper, become profitable, and they can pay back the loan, that money becomes available for more examples like this, so that we build the ecosystem. COVID-19 was a blow, but I think many of these examples show resilience by firms that augurs very well for the future. So may I then thank the chair and the committee for this opportunity to highlight some of the work of the department and the entities. I did say it's not comprehensive. There's a lot more work that has been done. For example, the Supplier Development Program of PepsiCo has supported Black-owned businesses, including farmers. The procurement that Shoprite Checkers will be doing now as a result of the competition measures that has been introduced. The work that the competition market inquiry is doing, say, on fast food platforms that will provide more opportunity for food grown and produced by small businesses to get onto export platforms, not export platforms, into retail platforms, an area that I know the committee will look at next week. So there's a lot more beyond this presentation that is beginning to take root. So I'd like to thank the committee and the chairperson for this opportunity. While I am unable to be here for the entirety of the discussion, as I log into the other meeting, I will try to remain at least for some of the remarks. But the Director General, Malebo Mabichi-Thompson, together with Pilisiwe Mtetwa and Joanne Bate from the NEF and IDC respectively, will be available to provide a lot more detail to the committee on any of these areas that I've touched on. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and back to the Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. I must just mention that this committee had an opportunity to visit the noodle factory in Philippi. I think it was in 2019. And it's very good to hear that they are still being supported. When we visited them, there were many women sitting on the side of the road hoping to be taken in for a day or for work. So it's good to hear that they are still being supported. And also their products are very good. I look for it when I go and shop with my granddaughter. Thank you very much. Members, over to you now to interact with the presentation that we've received from the Minister. And then the Minister's team will then remain behind. So I'll take hands. So Honourable Thring, Honourable Bergman, that's all the hands I see for now. So let's kick off with Honourable Thring. I'm sure other members will join.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to firstly appreciate the presentation and thank the Minister for the insightful presentation of work that has been done within the Black Industrialist sector. But also, Chair, just perhaps acknowledge that at the BRICS Summit, I met one of the beneficiaries of the Black Industrialist Project, and he was very appreciative of the work and of the support that he received. But Chair, having said that, I think that it is known also that we within the ACDP differ in terms of our views with regards to how to actually grow the economy. When we talk about, structural economic reform, which the President in his State of the Nation address alluded to on a number of occasions, I think very clearly this has got to be broadened. And At the moment, it is our view that it is fairly narrow, and there are a few individuals, perhaps some who are in the know and connected, who appear to be benefiting. But that does not take away also from the positives that the minister shared on this morning. But I think just to make the point that the ACDP's view of structural reform certainly would differ, and it has to be across the board as we grow this economy. It has to be all South Africans, irrespective of your race, your creed, your religion, your background. It's got to be all South Africans that become included within the process of growing South Africa. Chair, having said that, maybe just one or two questions. The first is, when I was down in economic development in eThekwini, one of the recommendations was that a list be drafted of products in order to grow the economy in eThekwini. The recommendation was a list be drafted, because obviously eThekwini also is it's a harbor port. A list be drafted of all of the imports that come into the country that can easily be produced by South Africans. So what are those particular imports? I think one of the examples, if I recall, was given that we were importing pots and pans when that could readily be made here in South Africa. And there was a few businessmen who then looked at that particular idea and started taking over in terms of beneficiation, localization, and producing here in South Africa. So my first question is there such a list that can be given to the entrepreneurs and say, look, this is what we are looking for. These are the goods that we are importing, but it can actually be produced if there's somebody who has the skill, the know-how, or just the tenacity and the hard work to do that. So that's the first question. Is there a list? My second question would be with regards to the continuity, and is the Black Industrialist Programme, how possible is it for this to continue on a longer scale, in a longer term, where if some of the Black industrialists who continue to rely on support from the program, and if that support were not there, would they be able to survive? So are we able to, in other words, are we able to wean them off continuous support? Because what you want to see is businesses that are able to scale up, use economies of scale, use our competitive and comparative advantages to grow their own business. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Bergman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, please excuse me if I ask questions that you haven't covered or you have covered in the past. I am new to this committee, but I must be honest, I do believe that our approach happens to be a little bit outdated, in the sense that we shy away from privatization. And one of the arms of government is a responsibility to empower, I want to say the minority groups, but it's to empower, as we identified, gender, youth, and here, as we say, Black empowerment. Now, government spending is one of those arms where one can actually, one can confidently do this. And yet government holds on to everything that it can, and it doesn't share, so to speak. It's that spoiled child that doesn't want, it wants all the toys, and it just doesn't want to share with anyone. And the problem is that we've got so many toys that we just don't know how to, we don't, unfortunately, run them all economically and wisely. And when you see some of the projects that you've got running here, and you see the success of some of the entrepreneurs that are running these companies that they've started themselves, You wonder why they're not in charge of some of these state-owned entities. So the problem is when you go down to a municipal level, of course, you see on a municipal level, there's so many opportunities where some of these industrialists could have companies that are supplying the tar, companies that are filling up the potholes, companies that are, supplying the street lights. And the problem is that we're so tied up in trying to do what is so outdated that we're not looking for the low-hanging fruits. And the problem is that the answer lies within the low-hanging fruits. And Minister, you mentioned it in the beginning, is that instead of empowering ones and twos, we can actually go for the 10s and 20s, because we can basically look at increasing the pool. So we don't have to go to Mr. A and Mr. B. If we just increase the pool of industrialists, and we said, well, we're going to tender for the amount of services and not for each contract, we're going to make the pool bigger. We would start this empowerment on a far bigger scale. There would be far more for everyone. The problem now is that when people start tendering, they have to put in these tight competitive tenders, and then they use subcontractors. And then what you're presenting is, of course, the beautiful side of the industrialists. But unfortunately, what we're not seeing is when the subcontractor gets costed out of the deal, or when he has to foreclose because he can't afford what the person that tendered originally has put in. So my approach is that we have to look at new ways to increase that pool, and we have to work on how we can make this pool bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Monakedi.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I also want to welcome the good presentation by the Minister. Very informative, and yes, it's very encouraging to hear that almost all the provinces in one way or another have been touched as far as this program is concerned. I've got two questions. The first one is what is or has been the success rate of the Black Industrialist Programme measured against the number of those who got enrolled in it? My second question is, what lessons has the department learned from implementing the program, lessons that can stand the department and other role players in good state, so that going forward, we don't have to reinvent the wheel? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Malamacha.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me take this opportunity and thank the presentation. The presentation itself, it has a very good story to tell. And Chair, without contradictions, I think we must really be applauded for doing the opposite, the positive things into the community where it matters most, without politicizing, without quoting history, by simply saying people themselves here are seeing what's supposed to be happening by improving their life and their living conditions. Therefore, this presentation is talking about things which are tangible on the ground. And here we need to put more support and not even putting any sort of statement that can suggest something negative. Here we are saying it started somewhere and is going somewhere. I want to strongly believe that there is a room to grow. The only question that I will want to pose is, Minister and the team, are there any plan to unite all these successful Black industrialists to measure to be able to can now say we are at a state where we can compete with the themes such as jumbo and the macro. I'm saying this to say growing bigger from where we started and be able to compete with anybody in this country. And further say, are their intention of going across the border, representing us, started from as little as this, so that this economy, we are part of it and ensuring that we keep it growing. Thank you so much, Comrade Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Dr. Ntwani.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for the powerful presentation. I want to commend you on the progress that that the department made with regard to the development of Black Industrialists, as well as the ones both in the food and agro-processing and in the energy sector. And I thank you for the growth in the community where it matters most. So my question is, how many of the Black Industrialists are located within the Industrial Parks program of the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, and how many of the Black Industrialists are exporting to the EU? And in line with this, what is our involvement in the Eco Industrial Park program, where I've read that South Africa is one of 7 countries that are signatory to the UN Industrial Development Organization? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't see further hands. I see the minister still on the platform, though. I'm not sure if he's double parking and whether he'll be able to respond to any of the questions. If not, then we'll go to the acting DG.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson.
Oh, you're still here. Okay.
I'm just keeping an eye on the other meeting. When it comes to my agenda item, I would have to jump out. But I would like the team members to also comment on the issues. So I'm going to take some of the conceptual questions and then ask the team to deal with a few of the operational matters. First, thank you very much to all 4 members for the comments that have been made. And I want to start by saying that though we should do more and we can do more and we should do better, we do, I think, have a number of examples now as South Africans that we can begin to celebrate. And when we celebrate these successes, they're a celebration of the entrepreneurship of ordinary people, often succeeding against the odds, and in a policy framework that I think all parliamentarians can feel in some or other way we've all contributed to. So I do think that part of what really helped Black Industrialists is when the public representatives can see the value and the benefit of it and can encourage those Black Industrialists, because business is a tough environment and you can succeed today, but you could have challenges tomorrow. And of course, the support that I know every member of the committee is giving would be very valuable. Honorable Tring raised 3 questions. The first one is whether the matter of structural reform. And I agree with Honorable Tring. And in fact, it's government policy that we need a combination of structural reform in the economy together with targeted support measures, that these two live side by side. One example of structural reform is the focus on market concentration, where very often you have a single or 2 large players who so dominate a sector that there isn't space for small businesses to come in. So structural reform would be about opening up markets and promoting competition. So the work of the competition authorities are important. A second part of structural reform in the economy is where we have the opportunities, as we have in the auto industry, for large export efforts. Our structural reform program there has been about helping to address the impediments to the building of a large local supplier base. And a few weeks ago, I went to a conference of the automobile component makers, and it was really an impressive example of South African localization at work, where we saw examples of both firms that are local and in a number of cases, firms that are owned by Black South Africans that are making a mark because through the reform of the APDP, the Auto Production and Development Program, we were able to embed a deeper level of localization. A third level of structural reform in an economy is both to increase the skills base of the economy, but also the skills mismatch to ensure that the opportunities for growing the economy is realized by having a better connect between the skills available and the skills needed. And that means working with universities. A fourth area has been the way in which we've opened up the energy market to more players. It started with the renewable energy program that government announced more than 10 years ago. And it's been supported by the IDC very vigorously. In fact, the IDC's total exposure in that sector is probably of the order of about 13 or 14 billion rand. And the IDC was an early mover when there was skepticism in the market about the appetite to open up for renewable energy. We put our money from the IDC on the table to encourage the private sector to come in. And since then, of course, it's been a sector that's grown very significantly. There are many other areas of structural reform. They are in the labor market. I've dealt with skills mismatches. They're in product markets. I've dealt with competition measures. So those are in addition to these measures that we've done. Because the presentation asked that we must deal with the Black Industrialist Programme, we've confined ourselves to the Black Industrialist Programme. But of course, as members will be aware from our other work, there are other complementary work that the DTIC does. On the list of products, so the department publishes the SARS data indicating which are the big products that we are importing. That is available on the website of the DTIC. There's probably an opportunity to simplify it a little bit, to draw attention to the opportunities a little bit more sharply. But I don't know if one of the staff members, Mohammed Woude, may not be on the platform right now, but he worked with a company using the example of pots and pans that was producing pots and pans here in South Africa after we had only imported it in the past. If he is on the platform, the DG may well want to invite him to speak to that. We've done examples on drinking glasses. We've done examples on many, many different products. We're now working on trying to get more localization of edible oil, the cooking oils that's used. But at the end of the day, while we publish the trade data, the opportunity require a whole range of things. And I want to come back to that with Honorable Monakedi's question. On the matter of continuity, sustainability, that's an important part of building a supportive ecosystem for Black industrialists. And not every company that we support will survive in the long term. And the objective is not to have guaranteed success. In a market economy, it's not, you can't have a company having a guarantee that it will succeed. A market economy is one of competition, and if you are unable to supply what consumers need, then in the end of the day, you don't have a business, and it's quite a competitive landscape. Our support is not to take competition out of the equation, is to ensure that where people have not had the opportunity to accumulate capital, skills, networks, and market access over time, that through focus measures, they're able to obtain that. And where those who've historically had those kind of access, let's say one dominant firm in a market acts in an anti-competitive way to keep newcomers out, that the competition authorities deal with that. Honorable Bergman, it's an interesting opportunity that we have through take the food value chain to build the skills base of more and more South Africans, young people, Black South Africans in this market. When you run a food business, it may not enable you to run a engineering business. So it's building skills in these different areas. Government spending is actually a very big driver of the Black Industrialist Programme, in that the procurement policies of government does give a level of preference to Black businesses. In fact, many Black businesses would like a higher level of preference. There is a procurement bill that is going through the parliamentary process at the moment that will no doubt be the subject of this kind of discussion and debate. So in fact, government spending, which I've not dealt with because we've tried to deal with the DTIC ecosystem, but more broadly, government procurement is a huge driver of Black economic empowerment. On the state-owned enterprises, of course, in the energy space, Eskom is now getting competition from renewable energy producers. Some of them are run by Black South Africans. I gave the example of 3 or 4 of these energy projects that are coming in competing with state-owned companies. And so there is an opening of the market in these areas. There's also a dark side sometimes to empowerment, the way in which empowerment policies can be exploited. And we could have scandals where someone doesn't use the money for the purposes that's intended. We can't guarantee that there would be no problems. It's when the department has systems in place that are adequate, it will generally detect these and deal with it. And it's a matter in any market economy. Steinhoff and Tonga Hewlett were examples of stunningly high level of fraud and corruption by those managers and boards, or overseen by boards that were dozy. And nobody says, that we should now abolish or prohibit the private sector. It's seen as risks that's inherent, that accounting standards must be improved, auditors need to do their work, government regulators need to do their work. And it's the same in the Black economic empowerment space. But what I want to emphasize is the exceptional work that is being done by many, many Black South Africans to get a foothold in the economy and to grow the economy. And I hope that came out. I agree, Honorable Bergman, that we should constantly increase the size of the pool. And that's where economic growth is so important. When you grow the size of the economy, there's more opportunity for everybody. Now, our programs are quite inclusive. I gave the example of the worker empowerment where, say, PepsiCo or Coca-Cola would have thousands of workers that are covered by those worker empowerment schemes. It covers Black workers and white workers. The IDC has programs that provide support to white firms owned by white South Africans. And so as we look at this, this is not the only part of our program. But I would want to urge all political parties, celebrate with us when Black South Africans are succeeding, when they actually growing the food supply of South Africa, and they're growing the energy supply of South Africa. These are great stories, and it won't hurt anybody out there if we had a lot more examples of success. It will in fact assist our economy, and please do celebrate it with us. Honorable Monakedi asked the question around the lessons learned. I'm going to ask on the success rate. I'm going to ask maybe Pilisiwe and Joanne and the DG may want to ask Susan to just make some remarks on the success rate of Black industrialists in their particular programs, what their experience has been. And I want to come back to the lessons. Honorable Ntwani also asked the question on the eco-industrial parks. I'm going to ask that the department identify someone that can answer that question. So DG, if I can lob that one to you in a moment. On the lessons learned, I think some of the lessons learned, and it would also be good to get the department and the entities to complement with some of the lessons that they believe has been learned. But the one thing is that finance is often not sufficient. It's in many cases needed, but if you don't build a supportive ecosystem, market access, mentorship, and support, then you can have a failing firm, notwithstanding financial support. The second one is that scale is important. But if someone has got absolutely no experience of business and they're going to start a business that's got 1,000 people, the chances of failure is high. But if they start with a small business, 40 people, 60 people, they show the ability to successfully run those businesses, and you then help them to scale up, to double their business or triple their business. Having built that business experience, the chances of success is much higher. So it's about staying with a Black industrialist over a period, helping them to grow, absorb their own lessons in business, and be a constant partner. Some companies came, borrowed money from the NEF. They paid back that money. They've come, they now want to do something bigger. They come back and they say, can we get a second loan? We've already paid back the first loan. Now, the lesson out of that is the process of building a business needs that kind of support. The third lesson is government can't do everything, that there's networks of support that Black industrialists can rely on among themselves. And so we've built the Black Exporters Network. I would love the department to put more effort into it. I don't think we're doing enough with the Black Exporters Network, because it can really be a great place for the exchange of experience and provide more support by one industrialist to another industrialist. And then the role of the private sector is vital. We've shifted from a focus where we saw the state as playing the only role in supplier development into one now where through the competition processes, many more firms are now having supplier development programs in place, which they run, which they drive, which they finance, and it's having some very positive outcomes. The DTIC has not historically monitored this, but in the new APP that's in place this year, there is a requirement for the department to monitor the spending on those supplier development funds and to bring that data into the quarterly reporting to Parliament. So we're building more accountability. But there are many other lessons. I've just given a couple to try to stimulate the conversation on that. Honorable Malimecha asked the question about uniting Black industrialists. Now, there's always an opportunity to get a number of these Black industrialists together into a holding company. But when you do that, the danger is you can have very different management styles, many different ways in which individual businesses run their show. And the private sector often works well when you have competition between players, among players, and you build a big ecosystem. So there's a role for consolidation sometimes in the economy where players can get together, but there's also many examples where that has been tried and it ends up in disputes and challenges over business strategy, how much money you take out by way of dividends, how much you reinvest in your company. Two entrepreneurs may be at very different points in their life cycle, where one needs to get a high return from the business, whereas the other one wants to invest patiently in building that business. So those are challenges. But there's been an important and interesting lesson from the history of Afrikaners, where they used cooperatives and these broader schemes. Even Sanlam and many of the big entities arose out of those mutual funds that were started. And there's not enough of those things happening. The big agriculture cooperatives, for example, BKB in farming, Clover Milk started as a farmers cooperative. KWV is a farmers cooperative, and many, many others, where people kept their individual ownership, but for certain aggregating activities, they would jointly set that up. So you'd still own your own cows and you would still milk your own cows and so on, but the dairy would be a collective enterprise that you all have shares in through a cooperative structure. So there's opportunities for us to think through that. And I know the Department of Small Business Development is looking at cooperatives as part of its mandate and focus. On going across the border, the new frontier for growth is the African Continental Free Trade Area. And once we switch that on, we must make sure that we have a very solid focus by smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, and Black-owned businesses in taking the opportunity of that growing market. Honorable Ntwani, some of the information on exports will be very sector-specific, and because our export data doesn't capture the demographics of an exporter, we don't collect that at the moment. But what ITAC is doing, they're looking at a very interesting project, and Commissioner Kawe is very enthusiastic about it, where they want to see what is the demographic profile of different trade policies. So in our system, there are millions of transactions that make up the entirety of the trade regime in South Africa. And so the information is not collected in a way that we can say, in this sector, this is the demographics of exports, this is the volume. But what we do is, through these impact assessments that ITAC is doing, we're going to have a better sense about how our trade policies impact either on demographics or on geographic concentration. What is coming out of the Northern Cape? Which kind of measures supports the Eastern Cape? So I hope that before the end of this financial year, we'll have some of that. It's the first time we've put it into the APP, and I hope it can be insightful and very useful to everyone. The industrial parks, Honorable Ntwani, is not a DTIC program. It's actually a provincial program and with support to local government. The DTIC has no say over the industrial parks. Treasury gives us a sum of money that we make available to individual industrial parks for refurbishing. Often the department overplays its role in the industrial parks, but it's got very little power. It can't appoint the management, the boards, direct them on what to do. And that's one of the weaknesses in our system, which is why industrial parks are as weak as they often are. Some of them are successful, but many of them are quite weak. I've asked now for the demographics of industrial parks to be collected by the department, including export performance of industrial parks. Historically, none of that information was collected. And so now in the reports that we get, we've got an internal system in the DTIC where the team collects data. One of the data sets that I've requested them to make available is a better measuring of the output, the overall output of firms in industrial parks, the export performance, their demographics, and where localization is taking place through those measures. So some excellent questions there, Honorable Ntwani, that I hope the department will be able to answer probably in the Q3 report, DG, maybe in the Q2 report, because that information is already being collected. But I'd want to suggest, Honorable Chairperson, with your permission, if I could ask the DG and through her, Susan Mangole, who heads the incentive work of the department, together with Joanne Bate and Pilisiwe Mtetwa, to respond specifically to what are some of the lessons that are being learned? What, in your experience, are the success rate of Black industrialists? What is your experience of the industrial parks, including any comments on the eco-industrial park, and observations about the ability of Black industrialists to export and not only to the European Union, but perhaps export opportunities elsewhere. If I could deal with that, and then depending if Tanya and the team is available, they can perhaps also comment on the work that has been done to support Black industrialists through the supplier development funds, and if they want to give an example or two in the question Honorable Tring asked about the list of products. That pots and pans one is quite an interesting one, and I would then leave it at that, and would want to ask Chairperson if you would be kind enough to allow me to then devote my full attention now to the stakeholder meeting that the President is currently conducting, and give me leave of absence. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for staying the extra time to answer some of the questions and to comment on issues raised by PC members. So you are excused to go to your next engagement, and we'll now hand over to the DG. Thank you, Minister. Go well.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the Minister as well. I'll deal with the question on our general experience in managing the Black Industrialist Programme, the type of lessons that we've learned, and then also a little bit on the industrial parks and on our success rate. So I think Minister has covered most of the key lessons arising out of the Black Industrialist Programme. The one thing that I would highlight is, actually I'll highlight two, it's the issue of demand. That for the most part, once you've dealt with the financing issues, if we are unable to secure demand for some of the projects, then it becomes a survival issue for the projects. And it's important that we start making sure that marketing is an important part of the support package that goes to the program, in order to ensure that this products find themselves in the market
And of course, the Black industrialists themselves as entrepreneurs are able to adjust quickly to market conditions and move quickly. And within the state, we have to move much faster, including with the work that we need to do, particularly on agro-processed products when there are market opportunities outside of South Africa that require that we've got standing and prepared arrangements to open up those markets for Black industrialists to also partake in. And that is the work that we're doing with the Department of Agriculture, how quickly we turn around some of the decisions, administrative work that needs to be done to make sure that from our end, at least as government, we do what we need to do to adhere to export requirements that ordinarily would come with those type of products. And then that locally, this thing of buying local is embedded in the way that we do things across the state, including even in Parliament, that we prioritize locally produced goods. And in saying that, I'm not in any way suggesting that when goods are overpriced and there are issues with quality, we should just buy them because they are local. We should press our industrialists to make sure that the goods are of the required quality and negotiate hard, even as the state, to make sure that we get the right price for the goods. But let us first prioritize industrialists in general and those that require even the most support, Black industrialists, in the way that that we procure, and just make sure that as we procure South African produced products are prioritized. And it's not something that we in South Africa are doing by ourselves. Right through the world, everybody's prioritizing locally manufactured goods. Why? Because you're supporting jobs, you're supporting economic activity in your locality. So that would be the one area I'll raise. The other area I'll raise is that we have seen from my experience that you would have workers who would emerge out of a situation where a company would be closing and they would want to take over that company instead of losing their jobs. And within particularly the financing architecture of South Africa, there's very limited instruments that are available for workers to be able to do that. And that is why government have to step up and allow that the other funders come on the basis of government funding. And in most instances, this will be projects that, of course, they are bankable, but because funders sometimes have a preference on the type of clientele that they prefer to do business with. They want you to have experience. They want your uncles to have money for guarantees. They want various other matters to also be taken care of so that they can secure their funds. And those are the type of transactions that we sometimes have seen coming across our desks, and that when we have funded them, you see an area where capacity that we could have lost is now reinstalled in the economy based on workers coming up and saying, instead of the company closing, let's rather own it and take on the risk of ownership and then move with that. And then they've got these hurdles that are built into our structure. Then on the success rate, it's a difficult question in the sense that we've gone through a very difficult time as an economy and have been hit with a lot of emergencies and crises that have made it very difficult for businesses to continue to thrive. And with those said, what we are seeing, because most of our Black industrialists would also have loans with the IDC, with the other funders, is that they continue to pay those and pay those even at a higher rate than other long-established businesses. And for us, that is a big indicator of their continued success rate, but it's also a little bit of concern because as you're taking money out of operations of business to pay loans, it does is that sometimes it retards the speed at which the business can grow. So on that indicator, we're quite satisfied that at least the companies that we have supported continue to grow. But as Minister has said, there are those that will close doors for a variety of reasons, and this is not something that is unique to this one program. It's something that it's really in the nature of the game when you're doing industrial financing, that there will be success, there will be failures, and where companies fail, we look very closely at the causes of the failures, and then we strengthen our monitoring approval systems to ensure that we limit that as far as possible. Then in terms of the industrial parks, as Minister has said, it wasn't a metric that we were necessarily looking at monitoring, because these industrial parks do belong to provinces and in some instances municipalities. So it is something that we will now be looking at, and as Minister indicated as well, for the next quarter will be part of our standard quarterly report. So with that, maybe through your permission, Chair, if I can ask Joanne and even the CEO of the NEF if they have anything further to add on the questions, and then ask if Mohammed can then just give an example of how through engaging directly with companies, we are also dealing with the import leakage that sometimes characterize our economy. Joanne, over to you through the chair.
Thank you very much, Acting DG. Thank you, Chair. Just to add on the question of the success rate of the portfolio, as mentioned, we've done to date about 41 billion rands, almost 42 billion rands worth of Black Industrialist finance to 523 Black Industrialists, creating approximately 48,000 jobs. What we have seen in an analysis done post-COVID, and I think to highlight again the point raised by the Acting DG, is that these Black Industrialists were created over a decade of slow economic growth, followed by 2 years of the COVID pandemic, which has significantly set back the capability and success within these businesses. So it does remain a key concern for us. However, if we look at the analysis of the portfolio that we did actually during COVID, what we identified is that the performance, so the non-performing loans or impairments on our Black Industrialist portfolio was in line with our ordinary businesses, or not ordinary businesses, the businesses that were not owned by Black Industrialists. So it showed that there were more sectoral and size constraints, and that the portfolio was performing as well as the other sectors of the economy. From an experience perspective, where we find, or lessons learned, where we see the type of funding is absolutely key. There are instances where we need to provide top-up equity to the transactions. Top-up equity over and above the BI grant is an expensive form of funding. And in the muted economic growth conditions, and particularly the impact of COVID, the coupon on those equity structures have become very expensive, and it is something that we are proceeding with absolute caution in providing equity type instruments, because these we do want to ensure that the business remains and is sustainable and successful. On the funding from other funding providers, we have found inconsistent appetite from the banking market to support Black Industrialists, and we believe that more needs to be done in the banking sector to ensure that the short-term facilities are appropriately priced to support these businesses to be successful. Those trade and other related products are critical enablers, particularly to exporters, and needs to be properly supported by the banking sector. One of the key areas of corporate governance, or rather of failure in clients, is around corporate governance. And that is a critical priority to ensure that we have both the right level of management and governance in place, the right skills to ensure that the business can be appropriately managed. We do offer non-financial business support. We found that that has become a critical enabler to support small businesses and Black industrialists to be successful. Typically, the Black industrialists are experts in market or experts in technology, but don't necessarily have the key financial skills to support the business. And that's often, particularly in smaller businesses, an area of business support that we provide to the clients to ensure that they can have regular financial statements and management accounts to appropriately manage the business. One of the biggest challenges we found, particularly within youth industrialists, is on this financial skills, is clearly understanding the difference between profit and cash flow, particularly in an inflationary environment, and really just helping the entrepreneurs to understand the importance of honoring debt obligations, setting aside cash for maintenance, and ensuring that there's sufficient working capital to allow the business to grow. We have had a few instances of clients who have grown too quickly, which seems like a great outcome, but what that ends up with is them having insufficient working capital and cash to actually sustain operation. So these businesses do need more active hand-holding and management to ensure that we are responsive to supporting them in growing. And I think just the one observation in our lessons learned is that many of these companies, if they'd taken up funding in a growing economy, would have had very different outcomes. So we do need to look at how we can continue to support this capacity that has been created to grow and be sustainable, so that we can benefit from both the support interventions that have been put in place, as well as ensuring that the productive capacity and jobs that have been created are sustained. Thank you, Chair. I will hand over to the NEF.
Thank you. CEO, are you still on the platform?
Yes, Chair. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honourable members. So, Chair, on the lessons learned, so if I may just highlight, some of the market failures that we have identified from our side. So the first one, Chair, relates to the limited own capital, because project promoters, especially when you look at Black project developers, they would have the ideas, but no balance sheets to actually back those particular ideas. And this would create problems, especially with own unencumbered contribution, collateral, and suretyship enforcement. So what the BI program is seeking to do or achieve is to actually try and deal directly with this market failure or the challenge that we're picking up on the ground. So just maybe to take the committee through the development life cycle of a Black Industrialist projects, because the minister was highlighting a lot of these projects, especially where we have made a lot of successes, but just for the committee to be aware that it actually takes a long period of time before a project is actually commissioned. So you actually start with the scoping and the concept, development of the concept. So this would be the initial stage of project development that is usually used to generate, refine, and shortlist the ideas. You take it to the pre-feasibility study, which is the second stage of project development, and then bankable feasibility, and then fundraising or financial close. So the difficulty that we would see, especially with these different development stages of a project, Honourable Chairperson, would be that you need to invest equity during that period, because you can't invest loan financing or senior debt from day one. So you need a lot of equity to be injected into those particular investments. So maybe the takeaway point on this lesson learned is that we need to find a way of encouraging or persuading the National Treasury to make an additional allocation for the Black Industrialist Programme. What currently exists has really assisted us, because when the DTIC co-invest with us, it would then allow us to leverage, that funding, especially with third-party funds. And then on the identification of the projects, just to demonstrate to the committee that, in fact, the work that we are doing in this space is deliberate, it's clear, and is very scientific, honorable members. So just to give you an example on the product identification phase. So when you pick a product, obviously we want to ensure that there would be both comparative and comparative advantages that are linked to that particular product. So let me use an example of a project that we're currently working on, honorable members, which is about the manufacturing of the disposable syringes. We actually saw this during COVID-19, in 2021, 2022, that as a country, we are a net importer of disposable syringes and other syringes. And we're told that as the whole of SADC and sub-Saharan Africa, that all of us don't have the manufacturing capability for disposable syringes. So what we'll then do, that is both NEF, DTIC, and the IDC, would be to say, if we're to manufacture these syringes locally, are we going to have the comparative advantage as a country? So for instance, with the syringes, we have, observed that we actually have a resource there, which comes from Sasol, is called polypropylene, which will then allow us to actually, upscale whatever, manufacturing capabilities that we're looking at. So the first one would be the syringes. I'm just giving you an example of the work that we're doing, especially within the pharmaceutical industry. Another one that we're looking at, which we're developing in partnership with our international partners, is the manufacturing of the dialyzers for the treatment of kidney disease. You'll think dialyzers, we see them in all the hospitals, but I think very few of us are aware that as a country, we actually import those dialyzers. So it's really about ensuring, so we have a long list. If we had sufficient capital would be in a position to actually do more of those. But I just wanted to demonstrate to the committee that our work is very deliberate and scientific. On our success rate, Honorable Chairperson, it currently sits at about 70%, but the 70% does not just relate to the work that we're doing within the Black Industrialist Programme, because you'll remember that the NEF fund across all the key sectors of the economy. So maybe after this session, we'll then just maybe focus on the Black Industrialist Programme only. The other lesson learned, which is a positive observation from our side, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members, would be the fact that if you take these projects through that development life cycle, so when it gets to bankable feasibility stage, we've actually seen that a lot of the commercial banks would then come in and also support us. So then maybe the lesson for us is to say, we need to find a way of developing more of these projects, because in that way we would be able to crowd in other investors so that we could then maybe achieve the things that Honourable Thring was talking about, and Honourable Beckman. And then Honourable Beckman also, he was also highlighting the need for us to identify the low hanging fruits, using examples of companies that would be involved in the services related sectors of the economy, like those companies that can fix potholes, street lights. Honourable Beckman, if we can sit here, or if you can invite us back to come and talk about those projects and initiatives, we have a long list. I mean, as the NEF alone, we have invested in more than 1,500 companies that are involved in all the key sectors of the economy. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Is that it, DG?
Chair, with your permission, I'm not sure, Mohammed, are you on the call? Just to share with the committee an example of how we have worked with a company to reduce imports, focusing on a particular product. Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you, DG. Yes, I could give examples of 3 products. The one that Minister mentioned was African cookware. And this was, this was a project that we've done with Massmart. So Massmart was importing some of their pots and pans, and there were long lead times, and they had to order huge quantities, which sold over 18 to 24 months, and it obviously tied their cash flow. So they checked with us to see whether we could identify any companies in South Africa who could produce the pots for them at the quality that they required. We then identified African cookware who produced, but at the lower end of the market. However, what happened was that Massmart, through their industrial engineers, supported this company and then designed a product that would fit into the Massmart stores. And as a consequence of that, Massmart is buying that cookware from African cookware, and it's one of the best-selling lines. In another example, Mr. Tami Gotswa, who is based in the Eastern Cape, he manufactures cooler boxes. Massmart helped him with the Supplier Development Fund with some funding, and he started manufacturing these cooler boxes. Again, it is an import replacement. And on the Black Friday, in the last Black Friday, this was one of the largest individual items sold at the macro and game stores. A third example is the Noodle Factory, which is a Cape Town-based company. Here, Massmart was having difficulties in importing noodles because they difficult to import. They're light in weight, and it costs a lot, to put it onto a container. And so they were looking for a local alternative supplier. We then reached out to the IDC, and IDC had a client on its books, and this business was not doing very well at the time. And then we've introduced them to Massmart, and Massmart helped them further design and develop the packaging of that product. Bought in some machinery at no cost to the client. I think it was about 800,000 Rand of machinery that was purchased through the Supplier Development Fund. And they started supplying to Massmart. But interestingly enough, only 25% of the products go to Massmart. About 70% of the products go to ShopRite. Today, they are the largest noodle manufacturer on the African continent, working 24/7 and employing about 300 people. So that's 3 examples that I thought would be useful for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And that was the feedback from our side. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, DG and the Minister in his absence for this engagement on the Black Industrialist Programme. And I think we will take the NEF up on the invitation for them to come and share more with us what they are doing, because we know that their contribution, them and the IDC, is very important to emerging companies and Black industrialists. So thank you very much. I think we will now continue with our agenda after a 10-minute break. And we'll resume our meeting at 11:25. Thank you very much, and then we'll look at minutes. Thank you, members.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Committee Secretary, can we proceed with the minutes, please?
Thank you, Chairperson. Margot will share the minutes of the 6th of June for consideration. Shall I proceed, Chair?
Please
Margot,
proceed.
the 7th of June, sorry. Correct. Chair, we had a briefing by the DTIC, NEF, and IDC on support provided to townships, and we considered minutes, Chair. If you go down, Margot. Chair, this introductory section. Then we were briefed by the acting DG, Chair, on the matter. Go down. And then we formally considered minutes up to the 31st of May, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes of the 7th of June? Honorable Ntwane.
Thank you, Chair. I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Honorable Moatse.
Thank you, Chair. I second the move of the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you very much. Next set of minutes.
The next set of minutes is dated the 13th of June, Chair. Here we had a briefing on DTIC on its fourth quarter financial and non-financial performance. We also received a briefing by the CIPC on the recent grey listing of South Africa by the Financial Action Task Force, and also progress in relation to the implementation of recommendations emanating from the report of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegation of state capture, corruption, fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. We considered the first draft of the report of the study visit to South Korea and also the third quarter program. Chair, we go down, Margaret. I think we had apologies from Mr. Mulder and Mr. McPherson on that day, Chair. We had the introductory section, Chair, followed by the fourth quarter briefing. Then after that, we received the report from the CIPC on the grey listing matter and recommendations in relation to the Zondo Commission. We consider the first draft of the report of South Korea. Members then requested for a delay in processing. Then we considered the committee's third quarter program, Chair, and the meeting adjourned around 12:36 until the 29th of August. Chair, that's the minutes for the 13th of June.
Oh, I see I've been muted and I'm speaking and asking for movers and seconders. My apologies. Can I have a mover for the adoption of the minutes as tabled? 13th of June, Honorable Moatse.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move for adoption of the minutes as tabled.
Thank you very much. Honorable
Monakedi, Chair.
Monakedi.
I second the proposal for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Minutes are duly.
Chair, if I may proceed, Chair, the minutes of the 29th of August, we received a briefing by the department led by the Minister on the Companies Amendment Bill and the company's second amendment bill, Chair. We had no apologies, Chair. Point 1 is just the introductory section of the session, which outlined the purpose of the meeting. We dealt with committee business in terms of decisions taken during the recess, Chair. And then we had a briefing on the DTIC on its fourth quarter financial and non-financial. That section needs to change, that's incorrect, Chair, but we were on the company's amendment bill. And the meeting adjourned at 11:15.
Thank you very much, members. That's the minutes of the 29th of August. Can we have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes?
Ms. Moatse, Chair.
Honorable Moatse.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move for adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Honorable Ntwane.
Chair, I second the adoption of the minutes. Sorry, just coughing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Minutes are duly adopted. Next set of minutes.
Chair, the next set of minutes is dated 30th of August. We received a briefing by the Gauteng Department of Economic Development and the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency on the status of development and plans for the Tambo and Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zones. We considered a draft study visit report. We also formally considered the motions of desirability for the company's amendment bill and the company's second amendment bill, Chair. Chair, with no apologies for that meeting, Chair. First part is the introductory section, followed by the briefing by Mr. Molefe and Mr. Ngobe and Ms. Dr. Zulu. Then we considered the draft study to a report, Chair, took the members through the concluding remarks. Then we formally considered the motion of desirability for the company's amendment bill and the company's second amendment bill, Chair. And the resolution that the parties will submit their recommendations with respect to the study tour report in writing to the Secretariat for consideration at this next meeting. The meeting adjourned at 10:12 until Tuesday, the 5th of September.
Thank you. That's the minutes of the 30th of August. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes as a true reflection of our deliberation? Honorable Malamacha.
Thank you, Chair. I yes then to move for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Moatse.
Chair, I second the move of the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you very much. Minutes duly adopted. Next set of minutes, please.
Chair, the next set of minutes will be the 5th of September. Chair, we received a briefing by the Northwest Development Corporation on the development plans for Babalege, Gwaze, Bodorelo, and Garakuwa industrial parks. We formally considered the report of the study visit to South Korea, and we also considered the first draft of the DTIC's fourth quarter financial and non-financial performance report, Chair. If there was no apologies, all members were present. First is the introductory section, followed by the engagement with the Northwest. Then we formally consider the report of the study tour, and the committee considered the recommendations as prepared. The report was adopted. Then we looked at the first draft of the fourth quarter financial performance. The committee secretary took the committee through the draft concluding remarks as captured in the minutes. And the resolution that parties shall submit additional conclusions or recommendations to the fourth quarter, and it should consider undertaking an oversight visit to the Northwest Province. Meeting adjourned at 11:15 until Wednesday, the 6th of September, Chair.
Thank you very much, movers and seconders, for that, the minute of the 5th of September. Members? We are almost there, almost done. Honorable Malamacha.
Thank you. I stand to move for the adoption of the minutes.
Honorable Moatse.
I second the move of the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Duly adopted.
Chair, we have the minutes of the
last
6th. Yeah.
The 6th, okay.
Chair, we received a briefing from SABS and the NRCS on the first quarter financial and non-financial performance for the 23-24 financial year. We also formally considered the fourth quarter report from DTIC on its financial and non-financial performance. Chair, we had an apology, I think, from Mr. McPherson. Followed by the briefing by SABS and the briefing by the NRCS. Chair, then we formally consider the fourth quarter, DTIC's fourth quarter financial and non-financial performance report. The report was adopted by the committee, and the meeting adjourned at 12:30 until today.
Thank you very much, members. That's our last minute for the day. The minutes of the 6th of September.
Mr. Mulder, Chair.
Chair, at this last minute, I'll move for the adoption to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mulder. Good to hear your voice. Honorable Moatse.
Chairperson?
Yes.
I move for adoption of the said minutes.
I think you're seconding because Honorable Mulder already moved.
Okay, I didn't hear. No, I move to second.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of the said minutes. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda item on minutes. Can I check with the committee secretary on announcements or any comments on the
program
work going forward? Yes.
Chair, tomorrow we will receive a follow. We'll be having a follow-up engagement with Leader and the DET and firms visited during the oversight visit in the Popa at the beginning of the year, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. That concludes our business for today. Thank you very much, members. Have a good day further.
Thank you, Chair. Bye, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Everyone. Goodbye.